If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
Scenario. It's 3 a.m. in a village in Nigeria's Middle Belt. Armed militants are moving street to street shouting Allah Akbar and we will destroy all Christians. Homes are burning, farmers are being executed in their beds, women and children are being dragged out at gunpoint. Law enforcement never shows up. By sunrise, dozens are dead. Another Christian community is gone and not a single mainstream news network will run the story. This is not a hypothetical. This happened last week and the week before that, and it's been happening every single week for over a decade. Tens of thousands of Christians slaughtered by radical jihadis, Boko Haram, ISWEP, armed Fulani militant networks, while the global response remains a calculated, deliberate silence. Tonight, we pull back the curtain on the normalization of Christian slaughter by radical jihadis, and we're done being quiet about it. Radical jihadis are clearly the enemy here, specifically Boko Haram, as I mentioned, the Islamic State West Africa province, and armed Fulani militant networks operating across Nigeria's North and Middle Belt. These are not disorganized criminal gangs. They are ideologically driven, operationally coordinated, and theologically motivated kill networks with a single stated objective: the eradication of Christianity from Nigeria and the establishment of an Islamic caliphate in its place. They attack at night. They target churches, clergy, farmers, women and children. They shout their ideology out loud during massacres. They post their victories online. There is no ambiguity about who they are or what they want. What they want is a Nigeria and ultimately a world where Christianity is wiped from the map. The only thing that's allowed them to operate this long with this level of impunity is a global information environment that refuses to name them accurately and a political class that has chosen appeasement over accountability. Welcome to Survival Dispatch News. It's March 3rd, 2026, and I'm Chris Evan, the CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined tonight by my friends Dr. Chase Spears and Frank Utu. Bottom line up front, radical jihadis, all the groups I've mentioned, have been systematically slaughtering Christians in Nigeria for over a decade, and the global silence surrounding this is not accidental. Why does it matter? Nigeria now accounts for 72% of all Christians killed for their faith worldwide. The pace of killing is accelerating, and the ideological networks driving it have nodes that extend well beyond West Africa. So what are we covering tonight? We're covering the verified body count, the name networks carrying out the slaughter, the institutional silence enabling it, the firsthand testimony exposing it, and what the American churches must do right now. So pivoting into segment number one, the information war is being waged against the body count. The death toll from radical jihadi attacks on Nigerian Christians is not disputed by serious researchers. What is being actively manipulated is the framing, with every major institution racing to label it anything other than what it is. The corporate media narrative machine has successfully conditioned the public to accept a version of events that insulates the perpetrators and paralyzes any response, which is not an accident, but a function of ideological alignment between legacy media and a political class that refuses to name the enemy. When you control what a crisis is called, you control whether anyone responds to it, and the consistent mislabeling of jihadi violence against Christians is intercommunal friction is the most consequential act of information warfare being run against the West right now. So I'm going to bring our panel on stage right away. Good to see y'all. Chase, I'm coming straight to you with this first question. At what point do you reckon does the deliberate mislabeling of jihadi violence cross from journalistic negligence into active complicity?
Well, Chris, thanks for having me back again. And we're way past that point. You asked the question, where is that line between journalistic ignorance and some fake attempt to try to be what they might call objective and actual complicity? And we are so beyond that line. We're miles and miles down that road. When you look around and you see the way that certain things are framed in the media, and this is not a new thing. Media framing is a study of media theory that goes back decades, and it understands that it's all about how you present a story. Again, I say it's all about how you present a story, and it's all about whether or not you choose to run a story. The New York Times, for example, decides what gets covered, period, and what gets covered on page A1 versus what gets covered on page B11, right? They order what they think is important, and through that, they decide how they want people to think about things and what they want people to think about. And we have seen with this situation in Nigeria, the near complete silence of the media, just like we saw when the church was attacked in Minneapolis. It was nearly wholesale ignored by legacy media. They were just kind of drug in, kicking and screaming because of an extraordinary amount of coverage on X. And if it weren't for Elon Musk owning X, that wouldn't even be the case. And so the only reason I would argue that we even have the slightest awareness of what's happening in Nigeria is because of alternative media, because mainstream media is not interested in covering anything that involves the persecution of Christians. Why? Well, it's patently obvious. They support it. They view Christians as a population that is an oppressor class that is deserving of having their comeuppance, because in their minds, Christians have always had the upper hand, even though that's historically untrue. But they believe that Christians are a valid target. And so when there's Christian persecution, just like when there's homeschooling persecution in Germany, any kind of person who holds to a traditional worldview and asserts that there is a God bigger than the state is problematic for the media and have no sympathy for it. And that's what we're seeing at play right now in this situation.
And that's a perfect encapsulation there, Doc. So, Frank, I'd like you to introduce yourself to our audience. For those of you who didn't have a chance to read our sit rep today or the description on this video, Frank is from Nigeria, and the acts that he has witnessed are beyond horrific. And he's going to give us a firsthand account of just how bad things have been in Nigeria. But Frank, first of all, let's get the introduction done.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris. So my name is Frank Uto. I'm a lawyer. I graduated from the Northumbria University School of Law in the northeast of England, in the United Kingdom. I returned to Nigeria, to the Nigerian Law School. I was the president of the law school of my set. That was the 2012 stroke 2013 set of the Nigerian Law School. I also served in government in my state of Benue. I was a principal special assistant to the governor of Benue State between 2020 and 2023. That's for 3 years. I came to the United States in 2024 January after our tenure had lapsed, and I was enrolled at the University of Central Oklahoma to study Masters in Public Administration, majoring in Public Policy and Nonprofit. So I recently graduated from the University of Central Oklahoma. That was 2 months ago, with an MPA in Public Policy and Nonprofit Management. Currently, I work with equipping the persecuted, because, of course, that's exactly what I studied. That was what brought me here, nonprofit management. And why did I come to study nonprofit? To be able to see how I can harness the opportunity around to reach out to our people who have been persecuted for so long and have been neglected. So we seem to be from a forgotten corner of the world, because for so long we've been victims of a silent, slow motion genocide that's been happening in Nigeria and perpetrated basically by the Islamist terrorist groups in Nigeria. And unfortunately, my country of Nigeria has the fifth highest number of Islamist terrorist groups in the world. It is surpassed only by Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Somalia, and then Nigeria. So within Africa, Nigeria has the second highest number of Islamist terrorist groups. Just within Nigeria, we have Boko Haram, who are operating in the northeastern part of Nigeria, and then we have the ISWAP, who are operating in northeast and northwest and north central. Then you have the Ansaru and the Lakurawa, who are concentrated majorly in the northwest part of Nigeria and stretching down southward. And then you have the most vicious and the most deadly terrorist organization, Islamist, known as the Fulani ethnic militia, who are operating basically in the middle belt of Nigeria, which is the center of gravity of the genocide in Nigeria. So these Fulani terrorist organizations are offspring of the great Ottoman Danfodio, who is their progenitor. He started the jihad in Nigeria. Then there was no Nigeria, of course. Nigeria was a contraption put together by the British in 1914. So he started in the land today called Nigeria in 1804. And our people, my own tribe, the Tiv ethnic group of the northern half of Nigeria, which they concentrate in the middle belt of Nigeria, were able to defeat the jihadists, and repelled them. But up to now, these people have not forgotten my people. And so they've continued from where their progenitors, their forebears, stopped. And so Nigeria have become a battleground for Islamist terrorists all these years. But it looks like we're, like I said earlier, from a forgotten corner of the world, nobody cares. Nobody cares. And like you said in your analysis and in the statistics you were able to put forward, for out of every 10 Christians killed in the world for their faith, 7 are actually in Nigeria. Not just from Nigeria, but in Nigeria. So that's the reality of what we lived with, especially in the past 25 years, since the introduction of Sharia in 1999, which gives official policy to the slow motion genocide of Christians happening. And so these militants are only acting like the executors of serving as the foot soldiers and the executors for those in government. Those in government are operating the policy. And then these jihadis are serving as the foot soldiers and the executors of the Sharia system. So that is the reality of what we lived with. I personally lost several members of my family over the years. In the past 12 years, I've lost count of the numbers of my families I've lost. Just last year, on June 13 and June 14, these guys stormed my village, the Fulani ethnic militia, the Islamist terrorist group. They stormed my village of Yerwata, and within 4 hours, that's starting from 9 p.m. on June 13 to around 1 a.m. on June 14. Like Judge Saul will say, he calls it the Father Day massacre. That's the Father's Day of last year. They stormed my village, and within 4 hours, they were able to kill 278 of my kinsmen, 34 of whom are my direct relatives, including an aunt of mine, an auntie who was like 8 months pregnant. They ripped open her tummy and removed the fetus and even slaughtered the fetus again. There's another aunt of mine who was sleeping with a 2-year-old baby. His name is Sate Amaki. When they stormed into the room, they doused this small boy, this 2-year-old boy with fuel. They doused him with fuel, doused the mom with fuel, and then set them on fire. So the next morning, we found the charred remains of the baby with his mom still hugging the mom, just the charred remains hugging the mother. Then there's my cousin. There's my cousin, Osoja Ikbaka, which is 4-year-old son, whom they burst into his room and then held him and slaughtered him with knife. Slaughtered him, used the same knife and slaughtered his 4-year-old son. As a matter of fact, they also slaughtered his wife, but she survived miraculously. And so when the woman was taken to the hospital the next day, she's been crying in the hospital and been asking to see her son, not knowing that her son was already dead. So she said she won't attend to treatment until she sees her son. That was the reality of what she faced for the next 1 month. Nobody told her that her son was gone. There's my friend, David Ukeima, whose residence was stormed into, and he jumped the fence, but before he jumped the fence, they lacerated his back with machete, and he was able to escape, but they got hold of his wife, they slaughtered his wife, they slaughtered his 3 male kids, and then stabbed his daughter. So the daughter also survived, but the 3 male kids were gone, and the wife is also gone. And then there's my friend Peter Akera, who got married and had to wait for 4 years, 4 good years before the Almighty God blessed them with the fruit of the womb. And so when he got the first child, within the next 2 years, God blessed them again and they got twins. And after a year, they got the 4th child. This is how these terrorists came and killed the mother and all her 4 children. The guy was not around on that day, so he survived. And then there's my very good friend again, Matthew Yomba, who spent so many years studying pharmacy in the university. He spent 6 years studying pharmacy, and after he had graduated, he went for housemanship, like the internship, at a teaching hospital in Kano, in northwest of Nigeria. So he came to the village a night before that incident to tell the people, his kinsmen in the village, to report his progress so far, that he has been able to complete his pharmacy. He's officially a pharmacist at this point. That was how these urchins, these terrorists, stormed my village and burnt him to death. On that night, they burnt him, they doused him with fuel and lit him on fire. What we found the following morning was just ashes of very handsome Matthew. There's this my very beautiful sister Ngodu, who was a 3rd-year accounting student of accounting. She has always dreamed of being an accountant. She was a church steward in the Catholic church in the village, And when they came that night, that was how they burnt Ngodu to death. She had just a year left in the university to graduate. She came to the village 2 days before that incident. And that was how they got her and killed her. So that's how they've killed my people. Like I told you earlier, more than 50% of those I knew, friends and family, were growing up. We're all dead right now. And they did not die through natural causes. They died in the hands of Islamist terrorists, who at any point they storm my village, their usual slogan is Allah Akbar, which has infamously become the globally recognized motto and slogan for jihadists all over the world. They would be chanting Allah Akbar from the beginning to the end, as they slaughter, as they burn, as they commit arson, as they shoot, as they rape. That is the reality of what we lived in. And so the world has neglected us for so long, but gracefully and thankfully, we want to thank President Donald Trump for listening to our cries on the United States Congress, especially Congressman Chris Smith and Riley Moore of West Virginia, and Senators Ted Cruz and Senator James Langford of Oklahoma, who are co-signatories of the Nigerian Religious Freedom and Accountability Act before the Congress. So we want to thank President Trump for designating Nigeria as a country of particular concern and paying attention to Nigeria. But as I conclude, I want to say this to the United States government, that what the Nigerian government is doing to the United States government is just they are selling a dummy to the United States government. They are putting up a smoke screen so that the government of the United States cannot see exactly what is happening. So right now, the government of Nigeria is saying she's cooperating with the United States government to fight terrorism in Nigeria. But what they are doing is that they are focusing this fight in the area where these terrorists have been killing themselves, have been killing Muslim. So they left completely free the area where is the center of gravity of this genocide, the Christian-dominated areas where these terrorists have been killing Christians because of their faith. There's an intra-house fight between these terrorist organizations. And so the Nigerian government concentrated their fight in those regions. And so it is Islamists killing themselves. And so the government always try to project that this is what they are doing to neutralize the terrorists. Meanwhile, they've left completely untouched the areas dominated by Christians where these guys have focused for so long. That's the reality of what's happening now.
So to the audience, I warned you that this was going to be an earth-shaking episode, especially the Guardians on our Element server. Chase, I got to ask you a question. You're, a communications guy. How has the Nigerian government's denial infrastructure been adopted and amplified by Western media? And what does that coordination tell us? I mean, it's kind of a loaded question, but I'd like to hear it in your own words.
Well, from what I've observed on this, the Nigerian government just wants to deny, and the Western press wants to acknowledge as little as they can possibly get away with. And again, as I said a moment ago, they've really kind of been drug into this kicking and screaming because of social media discussions about it. But it's clear that not only the government there, but the local press here in the United States, they're not beholden to what is true, what is right, what is proper. They're not driven by how do we protect the innocents. These are things that government exists to do. These are things that the press exists to help protect. And they're derelict. They're derelicts. They're taking a side. They're taking the side of evil. And we've seen this over and over and over and over again. I mean, in the American press, we might as well just call them the Vichy press, right? That an old term that goes back to World War II, which connotes French who worked with the Nazis. That's what we have the equivalent of today. And Chris, what bothers me about this so deeply, and it bothers me in so many ways, but let's boil it down to the most basic tenet of it. We are all endowed by something that is referred to as the imago Dei, the image of God. That's what makes humans different than all of the other species. That's why we have accountability. That's why we have an ethical compass, because of that God-shaped hole in all of us. We are created in the image of God. We are unique. And as such, it doesn't matter what your skin tone is, where your homeland is, even what you believe. We are still created with that unique identifier that makes us different. And this is where the dangers of intersectional theory come into play. An intersectional theory, and it's a term that's really been worked on by Kimberly Crenshaw, and we've seen it the last several years in what we'd call woke literature. And intersectionality says, it's a new twist on Marxism, and it says there are those who are oppressed and those who are not oppressed. And because I am a white male and Chris, you're a white male, there's no way we could ever be anything other than oppressors. But traditionally, according to intersectionality, which is a newer theory, less than a century old, if your skin tone is non-Caucasian, that's one level of intersection. If you're a woman, that's another level of intersection. If you have an alternative sexuality, that's another level of intersection, right? And according to their own canon, that's how oppression works. And because of that, they believe if you're a Christian, it doesn't matter whether you're a woman. It doesn't matter what your skin tone is. You are automatically part of the oppressor class. Why? Because Marxist theory is Luciferian in nature, and it hates all that is righteous. It hates all that is noble. It hates all that is good. And so when you have these people in Nigeria who, according to the traditional intersectional model, we should be, as good secularists, caring about, we should be calling for their rescue, but no, they're Christians. They're Christians. They're automatically off the scale, and their lives are completely meaningless to us. And this needs to be an absolute wake-up call. Look at what's happened in Nigeria, where radical Islamists have garnered enough political power that they are now steering the government. And they have got the government to completely abrogate its responsibility to help protect the population. That same thing can happen in every single other nation. Think it can't happen here? Think again. And this again is why we have to fight this. Islam is evil. There's no getting around it. That doesn't get me invited to any parties to say, but it's the ground truth. And if they could do it there, they would do everything they could to do it here if they can. Mark my words.
Yeah, I mean, it's the information war on steroids. Before I ask Frank the next question, for all y'all in the audience who'd like to see Chase on Survival Dispatch News more often, or maybe even host his own podcast, put a one in the live chat. I'd like to see what kind of numbers we come up with here. Frank, I have a really straightforward question for you. If the roles were reversed and Christians in Nigeria were killing all these radical Islamic Muslims, what do you think it would look like in the press globally?
The answer is so simple and straightforward. It's just like, the popular aphorism that says, no Jews, no news. Just imagine if the people killing the Christians in Nigeria were Jews. Just imagine what the news all over the world will have been, But that is the reality of warfare. So imagine if it were the Christians who were killing these Muslims. And let me tell you something. Do you know that the killing in Nigeria by the Islamists is 10 times more than what is happening in Gaza? But the world was not focusing on us. In my own state of Benue, Nigeria has 36 states. So in my state of Benue alone, which is a state that is made up of 99% Christians, as a matter of fact, right now we had a Reverend Father who is the governor of the state, the only Reverend Father in Africa, the whole of Africa, to be a state governor. It's in my state. So in my state of Benue alone, we have 1.6 million people in the IDP camps. 1.6, including my family members. So in the whole of Gaza, the people in the IDP camps are 1.4. So only in Benue State, we have a higher number of people in the IDP camp than Gaza.
Just quick point here, just sorry to interrupt, Frank. What Frank is discussing are camps that are for refugees, essentially, people who've been displaced and need somewhere, to call home, and in a protected area somewhat. So, Frank, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure our audience understood that you're discussing.
Correct. Yeah,
you've got refugees inside of Gaza, and then you've got refugees inside of your one state, Nigeria, has more than there are in all of Gaza. It's a staggering number.
Yes, and unlike Gaza has the UNRWA as an organization that takes care of refugees there, an arm of the United Nations. Unlike Gaza, in our state and in many of the Middle Belt states of Nigeria dominated by the Christian, in many of these IDP camps hosting the Christians, there's no attention at all whatsoever. You find that like last week, my younger sister called me to give me a report that in the last 1 week, they gave them just a noodle, a single noodle, 4 people to share a single noodle. One, not the pack, not the complete pack that contains quite a couple, just a single noodle to be shared by 4 people in the last 1 week. So that's the kind of neglect they've suffered. So a lot of malnourishment is going on in the camp, so much infestment of diseases, so much insecurities around. People in their own ancestral land, in their own country. So it's not that, okay, Nigeria is fighting a war with another country, and so there's this kind of humanitarian problem. It is the fact that within Nigeria, Islamist terrorist organizations are just all over killing Christians. And these Christians are no longer in their homes, in their lands. They are being kept in IDP camps, in refugee camps, and neglected completely, left on their own. So that's the reality of what's happening. So if the Christians, if it had flipped the other way, and it is the Christians who are doing this, carrying out this kind of killing, oh my God, it could have been a headline news in all the global papers, global news outlets, all over, if it were the Christians. And let me round up by giving you an example. You may be familiar with the Chibok case. The girls who were kidnapped, the Christian girls who were kidnapped in 2014. About close to 300 girls who were kidnapped, final year students in the high school. They were preparing for their exams when they were kidnapped, and the next day they were all seen wearing hijab because they compelled them to renounce their faith and adopt Islam. They were all seen, they released a clip. The terrorist organization Boko Haram released a clip of the same girls in hijab reciting the Shahada. Shahada is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It is the declaration of faith. That is what it says. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. That is, you profess that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. So that is the reality of what we live. These girls were married to the Boko Haram commanders. All of them were married to this. But the Christian community in Nigeria did not make any noise. They only called for prayers and intervention, But last month, there was a Muslim girl in a state called Jigawa in the northwest of Nigeria who eloped with a government official who was serving in that state, a Christian government official, who was serving in that state. She eloped with him. This girl is a girl of age. She's 22 years old. She eloped, but because she's a Muslim and the guy is a Christian, the entirety of the Muslim community in Nigeria, including the highest traditional ruler of the Muslim faith in Nigeria, who is the Sultan of Sokoto, an equivalent of the Ayatollah, staged a protest. They raised press conferences to denounce what happened, and they call it a capture and abduction. This is a girl who was of age, 22 years old, and she eloped to that guy because they were in love. But you could see the entirety of the Muslim community in Nigeria went into overdrive in protest. And again, there's another instance last year in Nigeria. Right now, in many places, when they see these Fulani guys, they are always suspicion raised. There's always suspicion raised. So last year, in a southern state called Edo State, some Fulanis were traveling. That's the ethnic group of these terrorist guys. So Fulanis were traveling in a trailer, and at a checkpoint, it was discovered that they were having about 13 guns. All that gives you the right to bear arms. So possession of arms is considered illegal in Nigeria, But those guys were having up to about 13 guns, and they were claiming to be hunters without hunting license, without any proof that they were hunters. So the vigilante group in that community, that Christian community, really tortured them, to extract confession, and in the process, about some of them died. This matter, as I tell you, it raises so much furor in Nigeria, to the extent that the governor of that state had to travel to the northern part of Nigeria to visit the Sultan of Sokoto, who is the highest Islamist traditional ruler in Nigeria, and to visit the governor of Kano State to tender apology on behalf of the people of his state for killing some of these Fulanis that were arrested. But you see, in all these killings in Nigeria, no governor from any of these Muslim states has ever come to say sorry to us for the fact that Islamists have been killing us. So you could see the contradiction. No governor whatsoever has come, no any high-profile Muslim has ever visited any of the IDP camps. And let me tell you, you see, in Islam, one of the 5 pillars, I mentioned one earlier, Shahada, which is the declaration of faith. The other one is Ramadan, which is going on right now. And the other one is Hajj, which you have to travel to Mecca once in your lifetime at least. And then the other one amongst the 5 pillars of Islam is the Zakat, which is alms giving. Alms giving is considered one of the most fundamental obligations of any Muslim. But do you know, in the entire history of IDP camps in Nigeria, because they are hosting Christians, no single Muslim has ever gone to any of these IDP camps to give alms. That is a place that requires alms more than anywhere. The IDP camps hosting these Christians in their millions. The Christians in the IDP camps, as we speak, are about 4.8 million across the state of Benue, the state of Taraba, the state of Nasarawa, the state of Plateau, the state of Kaduna, in southern Kaduna particularly. About 4.8 million Christians in the IDP camp, up to Borno and Yobe state and Adamawa state. No single Muslim organization has visited this IDP camp to say, our prophets demand from us to give arms to the less privileged. So we're bringing these packs of noodles, these packs of rice, these packs of vegetable oil to give you guys and support you guys. None whatsoever in the entire history of Christian refugee camp in Nigeria. So you could see the reality. They are just so happy that our people are confined to the refugee camp. They're happy about that. So that's the reality of what we live.
The dichotomy is crazy, absolutely crazy. Chase, I'm going to come to you with the last question of segment 1, and then we'll bounce into segment 2. But what's the downstream effect on American Christian communities when the global church, the global Christian church, is being slaughtered, and the information environment tells them it's not happening?
Well, I think the downstream effect of that is an American church, at least I speak for us here, that's largely ignorant to it and says, well, it's not in our backyard. And frankly, does Chase Spears, by myself, possess the power and the funding mechanisms to go over and change this all at once? No. And does a single church? No. But there are things that we absolutely should be doing. We should be pressuring our elected representatives. We should be pressuring our levers of government. Again, government is there to protect the innocent. And there are all sorts of debates I get about whether or not America should or should not be the world's policeman. And I come down hardcore on it should not be. I'm very near isolationist as it is. But there is one and only one faith that has ever brought stability to the world, and that's Christianity. And the scourge of our time is Islam. And a lot of people would like to caveat it and say, oh, well, this is just radical Islam. No, this is Islam. We have a lot of people who are of Muslim faith who I have had many of them good relationships with over the years, but they're not practicing the fullness of that faith. The fullness of that faith calls people like us infidels. The fullness of that faith says that we are deserving of death. The fullness of that faith says that if a Muslim is to kill a Christian, they have now scored points eternally, spiritually. We have to remember that. This was one of the big failures of the George W. Bush administration, was he kept saying, oh, Islam is a religion of peace. These are just some radical fanatics who knocked down the Twin Towers. And when I didn't know a lot about Islam at the time, I was a college student. I think I was a junior at the time. And when I went and looked at it more closely, I realized, no, this is their way of life. These are just the ones who actually carried it out to the fullness of their faith. And so my call to the Western church is, 1, we need to be aware of this. 2, we need to be praying for them. 3, we need to be talking to our elected representatives about this. We need to be bringing it up in public discussions like this. And we also need to let it serve as a warning, as an example to us of our responsibility within the stewardship mandate right here, right now. And I hear a lot of Christians, not all, there's some great people who understand that the stewardship mandate is still going on, but I know a lot of them who almost seem to think that at the time of Christ's ascension, it went away and we're just supposed to, as the Apostle Paul wrote, live quiet lives. And they misinterpret meekness for weakness. And that's not what we're called to do. I mean, we are called to not pick fights, but we're also not called to lay down and invite them. Christians, we in the West have been given such a gift with our constitutional rights, with our ability to speak into governments, with our rights and abilities to try to pressure the government to do what is right and righteous. And we need to be taking full advantage of that, because make no mistake, the same forces that have taken over Nigeria, and now they have the upper hand, they have the levers of power, and they have control of those who have the levers of power. We're seeing that happen in much of Europe right now. Look at Keir Starmer in England. The man is bought and paid for by radical Islamists. The man has not an ounce of courage nor an ounce of sympathy for his countrymen, for his legacy, for what was handed down to him by his grandparents and parents. He's throwing it all away because of what he gets out of it right now. And there are similar politicians here in the United States trying to spread that. We must contain that. We must stop that. We must not allow that to continue. We know that the world is a chaotic place. We know that all things are not going to be made right until Christ's eventual return and him holding literal physical kingdom here on the earth. And I look forward to that day. But until then, it does not absolve us of our responsibility to use what is given to us. And in this case, it's our voice, it's our civic agency, it's our laws, it's our ability to call on lawmakers to be righteous. We are responsible to use those things to prevent that from coming here, and also to fight for Christians who cannot fight for it elsewhere.
Yeah, I can get behind that. So you mentioned the religion of peace. So let's check in on this. And I'm assuming Frank's familiar with this as well. So I've been following this guy for over 20 years. This is the religionofpeace.com. And if you scroll down, look on the left-hand side, you'll see Islamic terrorists have carried out more than 49,024 deadly terror attacks since 9/11. And then if you go down a little bit more, you'll get the jihad report. And this is in the past 30 days. There's been 115 attacks, 748 killed, 510 injured, 4 suicide blasts, 19 different countries. So if you click through and you go to the list for the past 30 days, and keep in mind, some stuff isn't brought to light, immediately, but all the big stuff in here is pretty crazy. So let me see here. There's Nigeria there. That's a relatively small one, but they get crazy. Here you go. Nigeria on February 28th, 15 Christians massacred by Boko Haram in Borgu. And you keep going down a little bit here. Let me see. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that one. Madagali, maybe. 21 Christians slaughtered by Boko Haram. And we'll go down a little bit further. Daroa Babuje, 7 locals exterminated by Muslim terrorists. Another one, Nigeria, 2 killed by IS Western Africa. And it just goes on and on and on and on. Look at this one here. Kebbi in Nigeria, February 17th. A Lakura Islamist massacre 34 villagers in coordinated attacks. These are all Christians. And it just, the more you dig into it, the deeper you go into this stuff, the worse it gets. The numbers are absolutely staggering. So, wrong stage. Sorry about that. Let's get into segment number 2. We have a limited amount of time with Frank, by the way, so we may end up having to finish this one up between Chase and I. But moving into segment number 2, the scale, the acceleration, and the numbers they don't want you to see. Nigeria now accounts for 72% of all Christians killed for their faith worldwide, as Frank mentioned. According to Open Doors World Watch List 2026, we already have somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 Christians murdered already. We're not even at the end of March, for crying out loud. We're not even at the end of Q1. The acceleration curve is the detail that should alarm every prepared-minded Christian. The pace of killing is not holding steady. It's increasing year over year, with congressional findings estimating somewhere between 50,000 and 125,000 Christians have been martyred since 2009. More than 19,000 Christian churches attacked or destroyed. These aren't statistics from fringe advocacy groups. They're drawn from Open Doors, International Christian Concern, congressional testimony, and legislation introduced on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives, which means the government has the data and has chosen until recently to do very little with it. So, Frank, I'll come to you first on this one. When we look at this year-over-year constant increase in verified Christian murders and slaughtered, basically, in Nigeria, what does that trajectory tell us about where this is headed just in the next 24 to 36 months in Nigeria?
Okay, the plan has always been the same plan executed by Turkey. Turkey started as a Christian nation. If you remember, it was Anatolia, and then these guys came in there. They started infiltrating Turkey. They started killing. They started abduction, and they started taking over power. And before you know it, they seized the entirety of Turkey. And as we speak, Turkey has less than 2% of Christians in that country, which was completely a Christian nation before. And they, of course, you know how they turned Constantinople to Istanbul today. Constantinople was one of the greatest Christian cities of the past. It has one of the most beautiful churches, the Hagia Sophia. Today it's been turned into a mosque, and the mosaic is still there. So that is the story they're trying to apply to Nigeria. And if care is not taken, they are really, really marching toward the actualization of that. And when they do, when they achieve that, they turn it to an Islamic state like Iran, and then impose this kind of anti-pre-medieval measures that we've seen in Iran, like the restriction of freedom to Muslims, to women, to young people, so much restrictions, and of course taking us back into the Stone Ages, and then asking all of us to practice strict Islam. I think that's the reality of what's happening. And if that happens, the United States stands threatened, because Nigeria is the biggest oil producing nation in Africa. And the southern coastline of the United States borders the Atlantic Ocean. And so across the Atlantic Ocean lies the United States. And so if you imagine you have an Iran, Nigeria becomes an Iran. And then the United Nations is on the other side of the Atlantic. They may be releasing missiles straight to the United States. So that is part of the threat that the United States is potential threat that the United States is facing too. That if Nigeria falls to these guys, then the United States will also bear the brunt of what's happening. So these guys are guys who have a very big plan that has stretched so many years, and they are holistically, like I said earlier, holistically executing that plan. That is just their mission, to take over Nigeria completely. And they have their men in government. For so long, the Christians have been sleeping in Nigeria because we share love, we share brotherhood and neighborliness, good neighborliness. So we don't care about infiltrating the government, making sure that, okay, Christians take charge of this and that in government. Nobody cares. We feel that anybody who can do it, let that person take. But these guys have been so strategic in putting up their guys in the civil service, even when they are not as qualified as the Christians. If you go to Nigeria today, for every exams for employment or even admission into the university or high schools, the cutoff point demanded from this Muslim state is like 3 times lower than the cutoff point demanded for the Christian states, because the Christian states are basically more educated. So you find out, like my state of Benue, if there's an exam into a university or into a high school, they'll ask a student from Benue to score at least 180 before that student can be admitted in that high school or the university. But the same student in a state like Sokoto or Zamfara, which are Muslim states, will be required to score just 60 when you are demanding 180 for the student from Benue. So that is what they've used as official policy all this while. They've used the excuses of their people are not as educated as us, but in the long run, they infiltrate the civil service, the military, with these guys who are half-baked, and then these guys go up to become commanders, generals, without anything to show for it, but they dominate us in that area. And so when these guys are killing right now, as they're killing, they have accomplices in the military. The military is complicit. I'll tell you that free of charge, because I've seen it firsthand in my own village. In my own village in Yerota, in 2022, August, they came to my village and killed 14 of our people. And then the military detachment in my village, led by a Yoruba soldier. Yoruba is a tribe in the southwest of Nigeria. So that guy is a Christian, Kingsley Oludari, that's his name. I'm sorry I mentioned the name on air. Led by that staff sergeant. He led the detachment of soldiers in my village to repel this terrorist invasion. And that day they neutralized about 13 of those terrorists. Out of these 13, do you know 3 were having the ID card of the Nigerian army in their pockets? They are serving army officers of the Fulani ethnic stock, the ethnic group of these terrorists, serving military men. They joined their terrorist brothers to invade my village, where they killed 14 to 16 of my kinsmen on that day. Okay, before the Yerwata attack of June last year, June 13 and 14, 2025, on May 28th, they attacked my village and killed 6 people, including my late father's closest friend in the village, a retired army corporal, Ulam. They killed him, they killed his 2 children, and killed his nephew, and they killed 2 people in the neighborhood. Do you know that the following day, in a neighboring community, which is about 6 miles away from my own community, but it's made up of our own people, we are the same people, the thief people. In that neighboring community, a thief woman was going to the farm to fetch firewood so that she could come back and cook breakfast for her kids that morning. Then she saw a Fulani guy who was trying to restart a motorbike that was spoiled. So he was trying to fix something like the chain on the motorbike and restart it. So when she passed through, she saw that the guy had splashes of blood on his clothes and even on the bike. Yeah, because they are always used to slaughtering with machete and knives. So sometimes they are splash, from when they are cutting someone on the neck, it splashes. The blood of human, not chicken, not goat. So she saw him with splashes of blood on his clothes. Of course, that's the first ground for suspicion. She went back into the village and raised alarm. And the village youth came out and they went and arrested the guy. And after some measure of torture, our people are easily peeved because of what's been happening to us. So when they see somebody under suspicion, they easily torture such a person. So the guy confessed, but a true confession, not that born out of duress anyway. He confessed that they carried out the attack in Yerwata the previous night, which was my community, wherein they killed my late father's closest friend with 3 members of his household. So he confessed that he carried out that killing, and he confessed that it was a military guy in the community where he was arrested, because there was also a detachment of military in that community, about 6 soldiers in that community. So he said it was one of the military guys there who gave them the bike they used in the operation. That motorbike was given by a military. This was as recent as May last year, a military guy. So the youth arrested the guy and took him to the station where the military guys were and accosted that particular military guy who was accused. And that was how the senior military officer there decided to deploy him to Makurdi to report him to the capital of Benue State. And that was how the whole thing died a natural death, because the guy who was heading the battalion in Makurdi at that point was also another Fulani guy. So that's how strategic these guys are. They will spread their guys to become the commanders of military or police in Christian-dominated states, so that when these guys come killing, there will be no arrest. There will be no arrest, and rather there will be complicity. So that they are so strategic. That's the reality of what we lived with all the while. Yeah, I'm a first-hand witness to all this. I'm telling you, I'm a first-hand witness.
Well, I believe you because of our mutual friend, Pastor Sam. He's had nothing but good things to say about you, and of course, he's been in Nigeria doing the Lord's work. So we know it's absolutely 100% coming. Chase,
Correct.
Just to wrap up the second segment here. How does the destruction of 19,000 plus Christian churches factor into the long-term strategic objective of the jihadi networks carrying out these attacks?
Well, a lot of it's psychological and a lot of it's physical. It's really kind of a two-pronged approach. If you can destroy the church, then you can eventually try to demoralize the people and make them separate from each other and hopefully try to pressure them in their isolation away from their belief. And Christianity is a team sport. That's why we are called as Christians to assemble together. And it's a time-tested tactic of every usurper, every dictator, every evil ruler throughout history is to try to destroy the church. Because if you can destroy even the physical infrastructure, then you deny the people of God a place to gather and meet. And so that's what they're trying to do. It's a demoralizing thing. It's a thing to try to divide. It's militarily, it makes perfect sense that that's the angle you would want to use, and we've seen it used many, many times. And when you look back in the early church history, that was actually a method that ended up spreading the church. And so there is a silver lining in this cloud. And I don't say this to be flippant or to be dismissive of the persecution of our brothers and sisters in Nigeria by any means. I want to return fire. But one thing that I do take comfort in is a reminder that throughout history, every single dictator has convinced themselves that he is going to be the one who's going to actually do it. He is going to be the one who actually stamps out Christianity. And you may subdue it in a particular land for a particular time. You may drive it underground in a particular land for a particular time. But no one has ever been able to stamp it out. They can persecute, they can martyr, but they will never be able to stop what God is doing. But again, that doesn't absolve us of our responsibility to help our brothers and sisters and to enable them to be able to fight back.
Yeah. Well, as per all of your other answers, very, very well stated. So we're going to move into segment number 3 now. The ideology of the networks and the stated objective. So Boko Haram, ISWAP have not been quiet about their intentions. They've publicly, repeatedly declared Christians as targets, explicitly stated their goal of building an Islamic caliphate, and their operative shout, "We will destroy all Christians" during attacks, which is about as clear of a statement of ideological motivation as any honest analyst requires. The Fulani militant networks, responsible for 55% of recorded Christian deaths between 2019 and 2023, according to Open Doors, operate with a structure that includes pre-dawn raids on sleeping villages, surveillance of displaced communities, targeted assassination of church leaders, and systematic seizure of Christian farmland. The emergence of new groups like Rawa Mahmuda, I might have to get some help from Frank on those ones, and others alongside. Say it again, Frank.
Yeah, Mahmuda.
There you go. Thank you. Alongside the established ISWAP and Boko Haram infrastructure signals that the jihadi enterprise in Nigeria, it's not degrading, it's expanding with new cells, filling operational gaps and pushing the violence southward into previously stable Christian regions. So first question is going to go to you, Frank. How do the publicly stated ideological objectives of Boko Haram and ISWAP compare to the operational behavior of the Fulani militant networks? And what does that alignment potentially tell us about coordination between these groups?
Okay, thank you very much. The truth of the matter is that Chess is is a veteran, so he's an ex-military guy, so he understands this better. Just like in the military, there are different sections. There are different battalions. There are different arms of the military. These are the Air Force, these are the Navy guys, these are the Marines, the Army. That's exactly what these guys are operating to. They have a common denominator, which is Sharia, which is Islamization, but they're coming through different angles. But of course, they are targeting the same thing, and sometimes there's always this battle for superiority amongst themselves, especially the ISWAP, Islamic State West African province, and the Boko Haram in the northeast. Sometimes they do clash for superiority or for control of territory, because they like to get territory so that they can tax the people. That's how there are a lot of very big ungoverned spaces in Nigeria. These non-state actors have taken so much swath of land in Nigeria that they are taxing the people, the Christian villagers, taxing them, getting taxes, and that's how they are raising funds to buy their arms. So sometimes there's that superiority clash between themselves for control of a certain place. But ultimately, their target is the same, but they're coming under different names. It's just like ISIS was playing the same thing with Al Qaeda, if you remember, was playing the same thing with Taliban. Their target is the same. Their mission, their objective is the same. It's just like in around Israel today, Hezbollah, Hamas, and Houthis are carrying out the same thing but coming under different platform, different umbrella, and different name. They are all geared to total obliteration of the state of Israel. So these guys, that is their target: total obliteration of Christians in Nigeria, or Islamizing Nigeria, getting all of us to convert to Islam or to be under an Islamic government, because they love domination, because the whole religion is built on the desire for conquest and domination. So that is the ultimate target, but then they are coming under different groups, different platforms. And they also shared territory. Like I mentioned initially in the first part of this interview, I said Boko Haram and ISWAP, they are concentrated in the northeast part of Nigeria, majorly in the states of Borno, Yobe, Adamawa, up to Bauchi, and then the Ansaru, the Mahmuda, the Lakurawa are concentrated in the northwest, in states like Katsina, in Zamfara State, in Kebbi State, in Sokoto State. Sokoto State was where the United States released Tomahawk missiles on December 25th last year. It was in Sokoto State, which is a seat of caliphate in Nigeria. The number one Muslim in Nigeria is in Sokoto State. That's the Sultan of Sokoto. So you could see that is a seat of caliphate, and so it's also used as the operational headquarters of this terrorist organization, And so it is the same Mahmuda that stretched down to part of north central in the states of Kwara and Niger, up to the southwest. But the Fulani terrorists are majorly the ones in charge of the north central, from my state of Benue to Plateau State to Nasarawa State to Southern Kaduna. So that's how they divided themselves. So that's why I say they are like the military. They've divided themselves into different command structures. These ones are under this command structure. This one are under this. But ultimately, the target is the same.
Thank you for that clarification. So we've only got Frank for about another 20 minutes. So I'm just going to ask one more question, Chase, in segment 3, and then we'll move on to segment 4. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, being a career military veteran here. When the U.S. launched Christmas Day airstrikes on ISIS targets in Nigeria, what did that action confirm about the threat assessment the administration was working from, and how come we haven't seen any follow-up since then?
Well, this administration certainly isn't going to launch any attacks if they don't believe that there's a credible threat and it is a target that is absolutely worth engaging. And so those Christmas Day attacks, first off, I was thrilled to hear there finally was an attack, because those militants in Nigeria need to be held accountable. They need to know that they're being watched. They need to know that they can be reached. They need to feel the same terror that they are trying to inflict on other people. That is a good thing, and I was thrilled for that. And so it confirmed, yes, this is there, right? Because we had the rest of the Western press and we had the Nigerian government trying to downplay this as if there was just some minor sectarian skirmishes and some minor sectarian differences of opinion. They were trying to act like there wasn't this mass, widespread murder at wholesale, wide level of Christians across that land. And so we saw by the fact that the President Trump would actually launch those attacks, there is something there. Where there's smoke, there is fire. Chris, why haven't we seen follow-on actions? That's a question that I have asked myself as well. It would be easy to think, okay, we hit the major targets we need to hit and move on. I don't think that's the case here. And I share the concern about why are we not still doing more? Now, I do realize that the attention span of a nation, the ability of our War Department to reach out and touch somebody is limited by physics, by time, by space. And the Department of War has a lot of things that they're focused on right now. So I'm speaking for myself here. I have no inside knowledge on this. I suspect strategically, the assessment is, even though the Americans know that there's a major issue still going on in Nigeria, I think the threat assessment is assumed to be higher in other places like Iran. And so that's where the majority of focus is right now, because again, there's a finite number of resources and time. But I desperately don't want us to lose sight of this, because again, as Nigeria goes, that's an oil-rich country. It's a country that does have the potential ability in years to come to actually be a menace to the U.S., besides the moral fact that we as Christians have Christian brothers and sisters there who are suffering. And so we need not to forget about that.
Yeah, I think people need to be aware of it before they can forget about it. So
this is true.
I'm not making light of it. I'm just saying that there's so little coverage on this that when you mention it to people, they're like, "Oh, that can't be happening." I haven't heard anything to that effect. They've done a great job of sweeping this under the carpet. But let's pivot into segment number 4. Normally, I do some show sponsor stuff in between 3 and 4. I'll save that until after we lose Frank. So segment 4 is the U.S. response, the congressional record, and what it means. So the Trump administration's redesignation of Nigeria is a country of particular concern. The Christmas Day airstrikes on ISIS targets in Sokoto State, the deployment of 100 U.S. military advisors to Bauchi, and the bipartisan congressional report delivered to the White House represent the first serious policy response to this crisis in 2 decades. And it happened because enough Americans demanded it. The Nigeria Religious Freedom and Accountability Act of 2026, introduced by Representatives Moore and Smith, with support from House Appropriations and Foreign Affairs Committee leadership, creates a formal congressional accountability structure that includes conditioned aid, mandatory reporting, and direct pressure on the Nigerian government to end impunity for jihadi attackers. The gap between what Congress now officially knows and what the American public has been told by mainstream media is itself a national security issue, because a population that does not understand the scope of jihadi violence against Christians abroad is not prepared to recognize or respond to the ideological infrastructure that enables it here. So let me come to you first on this one, Frank. I'm curious what your thoughts are as an attorney in particular. How significant is the shift from designating Nigeria as a country of particular concern being, reversed essentially to Trump reimposing and acting on that designation with military force? So in other words, was a previous designation that nothing happened, and now Trump's reversed course and he's reimposing all of the measures that should have been enforced for years to try and pressure the Nigerian government into doing the right thing here.
Okay, so if there's something many people know about President Trump, it is his sincerity, his penchant for sincerity, and the fact that he always executes what he promised. Like if you see what's happening in Iran, he has always promised it and he executed it. Look at what he did in Venezuela. He promised it and it came to pass. And so he promised us the day he was designating Nigeria as a country of particular concern. He promised us that if the government failed to act, he will come into that country and act swiftly, and sweetly. And so we're still expecting that. But the truth of the matter is that the government has been placed on somehow on overdrive since the day the president of the United States designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern, because for so long we're operating like in a forgotten corner of the world. We felt completely isolated, so we felt we're just on our own. But right now, it shows that there's somebody somewhere watching and supporting, and so that is why, the government has been placed on overdrive. And you could see that they've been sending delegations after delegations to the United States. They've been recently they contracted a DCI lobby group in a contract that's worth about $9 million. This $9 million in Nigerian naira is about 14 billion naira, which could have gone to a very great extent in tackling these insecurities and returning our people from the IDP camps back to their ancestral lands, back to their homes, But you look at what is their priority. Their priority is how to launder the image of the government, how to sell a false narrative to the government of America and the outside world. But the underlying secret, the underlying truth behind all this is that the government has been placed on tenterhooks right now. It is no longer like before, where we're just on our own without any support. Right now, we're having the support of the United States government, the United States Congress, and the United States executive, and very importantly, evangelicals in the United States and great people of the media like you and the non-profits like you. All of you guys be long before now, you don't know what's happening in Nigeria, but right now you know, and your viewers, your listeners are beginning to know more and more that Nigeria is the worst place for a Christian to live at this time, because 7 out of every 10 Christians killed worldwide are in Nigeria. I'm not saying I am very deliberate in saying from Nigeria, because when you say from Nigeria, sometimes it means that I may be in another country, but because I'm a Nigerian and I was killed. No, but we're talking of those in Nigeria. That 7 out of every 10 are always in Nigeria. Nigeria in Nigeria. That's the unfortunate reality of our trajectory. So we thank the president for designating it, because we could feel a sense of some like the hornet's nest, has been shaking sort of. So the government has been trying to sell a different narrative, but some of us who are victims of this, who are survivors of this, who are witnesses to the genocide happening in Nigeria, will continue to keep the government on our toes and continue to report the truth of the matter, that about what is happening in Nigeria. So finally the designation for us is a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call because it exposes our government and our land as a land that has that egregious violation of religious freedom, especially Christianity. So it exposes. So it's a wake-up call that the government is beginning to wake up, at least in trying to, even if it is for the sake of rhetoric, in trying to talk about it. Because for so long, the government has been sleeping on its own. You could see in a place where 200 people were killed, like in my community where 270 people were killed, the president did not visit the community. That is, you can't find this anywhere in the world, that a president of a country will not visit a spot, a place where 278 of his people were killed. It's unimaginable in any Western or any civilized clime, but that is what we've always had in Nigeria. So the designation has really, to a very great extent, working up our government. Even the lies they've been dishing out is part of the wake-up call. Even the lobbyist group they've been hiring is part of the wake-up call. So we hope that it goes forth to change the situation on ground.
I appreciate that, Frank. Thank you. So, Chase, coming to you, I'm just going to give you one question here in segment 4. Then I'm going to give Frank a chance to talk about how Americans can assist Nigerians. And then you and I will do the final segment on the American church. So my question for you, Chase, is what does the deployment of U.S. military advisors to Nigeria signal to other jihadi networks operating in West Africa and beyond?
Well, anytime that the U.S. actually designates assets to go into a region, that signals a certain level of U.S. commitment. even if it's only advisors. And I don't say only advisors to minimize them, because we have used advisors around the world and tried to, and successfully in many cases, been able to help certain state nations and certain security forces to be able to enhance their procedures, enhance their tactics, to better supply themselves, to assist them in some of those ways, to be more capable against guerrilla forces. And so it's just like with this bill that was introduced that Frank was just talking about. Anytime that you can get the power of the United States to acknowledge a problem, all of a sudden the dynamic changes. The press can ignore it all day long. The pundits can say, oh, it's a mere matter of sectarian differences all day long. The apologists for evil Islamists around the world can try to downplay it all day long. But at the end of the day, the United States of America is still the world's leading superpower. And so when our nation says, we see a problem here, and we're going to actually start putting some attention on this, and we're actually going to start sending some advisors and looking at doing legislation that may come with targeted sanctions, may come with freezing certain assets to restrict the ability of certain officials to carry on that malfeasance, that changes the record. Right at that point, no one besides MSNBC can deny anymore that there's a problem. So this is a good first step. And I want to go back, Chris, to something that I said earlier about Iran. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday, about how Iran is the leading exporter of terror, how Iranian forces, how that horrific government has enabled terrorist forces around the world, has been the primary funder, trainer, and moral supporter of agencies like these that are terrorizing Christians in Nigeria and many, many other places around the world. And so it's entirely possible that, again, part of the strategy the U.S. is looking at for why we're doing what we're doing in Iran will actually have trickle-down effects there in Nigeria as well. And I rather imagine behind closed doors on documents and conversations that are cleared at far higher levels than we are, there are probably linkages being discussed between the two.
Great way to connect the dots on that one. Appreciate that, Chase. So, Frank, before we let you go, tell me about equipping the persecuted.org. I've shared the link once. I'm going to share it again. This is not a small organization. I mean, you guys have some heavy hitters in the leadership team, your board of directors. It's really impressive. And for all y'all who want to see videos of some of this stuff that's gone on, go here, Equipping the Persecuted, hit the media tab and videos right there. But Frank, tell us about equipping the persecuted.org.
All right, thank you very much. You see, like I told you earlier, we, the persecuted Nigerian Christians, have been forsaken. We felt forsaken by the whole world for a very long time. You know, the government of our country never pays attention to our people, all our people who have been confined to the IDP camps and the bereaved families. So, Equipping the Persecuted was born by Judge Saul from Iowa some few years ago, around 2018, 2019, where it was the height of his activities in Nigeria. You know, they were coming to Nigeria to provide relief materials, to provide medication, to provide even shelter to people that have been displaced, you know, because the government doesn't care. Nobody cares. Even the private individuals in Nigeria doesn't care. They don't care. So when these people are thrown away out of their villages and they go to the IDP camps, you begin to record many number of deaths within the IDP camps because a lot of people die from malnourishment, you know. So Equipping the Persecuted was born to take care of this kind of to take care of providing relief materials to the IDP. So they've done so much. I knew about them while I was in Nigeria. I never knew that when I get here, I'll get close to them, you know. But upon coming here and last year, they created a way for me to address the press at the iconic National Press Center just barely 3 weeks after the killing in my village, where I addressed members of the U.S. Congress and the American press at the National Press Club in in Washington D.C., and that was how our relationship started. And so, me as a survivor have become part of the team, and I've been influencing some of the reliefs that have been going to many of these displaced communities in Nigeria. Even 3 days ago, on Saturday, Equipping the Persecuted was able to send quite a considerable amount of relief materials to one of the most forgotten IDP camps completely. Nobody, since the establishment of the IDP camp about 3 years ago, nobody has ever taken anything. These people were living on leaves. They feed on cassava leaves. I have the pictures, I have the videos. They feed on cassava leaves. They were sleeping on bare floor. And so some of them, they had just about 3,000 people sharing just 6 mosquito nets. So you will sleep with the mosquito net today and hand over to another family tomorrow. You sit on the bare floor and cover yourself with the mosquito net. That's what they've been facing. And so on Saturday, our team dispatched quite a considerable amount of mosquito nets, about 300 mosquito nets, about 70 mattresses, about 100 mats, sleeping mats, body cream, lotion, about 100 sacks of bags of rice, bags of beans, bags of one of the most popular staple foods in Nigeria called gari. We took about 22 different items to the IDP camp. So that was like their happiest moment ever in life. We just fulfilled what Mahatma Gandhi said. Mahatma Gandhi said, there are people in the world that are so hungry that God cannot appear to them except in the form of bread.
Wow.
So we took bread to these people, and they were happy. Up to this moment, they keep sending messages to us, messages of appreciation, because they've never seen something like that ever since they were there. They weren't even having bucket. In Nigeria, we hardly use shower. It's just the rich people that use shower, that have water running through their bathrooms. So we, the peasants in Nigeria, we use bucket to take our bath. You fetch water in a bucket. You use a bowl to fetch it from the bucket to bath. So they weren't even having buckets to bath. They've been going long number of days without bathing. So on that day, we took several hundreds of buckets to be distributed, including detergent and bathing soap and some of these other basic necessities. So that's what example of what Equipping the Persecuted has been doing. And she's been doing that almost every week in different locations in Nigeria. So I want to also use this opportunity to thank the founder for that vision, because I think he's just carrying out the Lord's, what Jesus Christ admonished all of us, his followers, when he said, whatsoever you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me. So I want to thank Judge Saul and the entire team for what they are doing, and for all other nonprofits in the United States who are committed to helping our people in Nigeria.
I appreciate that. Just quickly for Doherty on Rumble, he said peasants, just to decipher that for you. Well, Frank, I appreciate your time and insight. It's been a fascinating conversation. All y'all out there, stick with us. Chase and I are not done with this topic. Yeah. Frank, I'm going to connect you and Dr. Chase by email.
All right.
We'd love to see you again at some point in time. Thank you.
All right, I appreciate you so much. And sorry to the viewers, you may check our organization, equippingthepersecuted.org, and you can make whatever contribution you'll be able to make, whatever stipend will go into these impoverished communities of persecuted Christians in Nigeria, by God's grace. God bless you all.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Godspeed.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
All right. So now we have to follow that up, Chase.
Wow. I mean, it's just, I can't wrap my head around this. I mean, Chris, I'm a soldier. I'm not immune to how evil the world can be. And just, I'm still processing a lot of what he said. It's just the darkness is so real.
It is, absolutely. So let's get into segment 5, which is really more so in your wheelhouse anyway. The American church, the preparedness imperative, and the coming wave. So You're more of an expert on the church than I am. We're both preparedness experts. So let's try and stitch all of this together. So the pattern being established in Nigeria: coordinated attacks on faith communities, systematic destruction of churches, targeting of clergy, government denial, and media normalization, is not confined to West Africa. And every church in America that's not building a security posture right now is operating on borrowed time. Would highly encourage you to visit my friend Keith Graves, ChristianWarriorTraining.com. Whether you have a security team or not, I guarantee you will learn a ton, and you will learn it for free. Keith was a cop for 29 years, drug and gang interdiction specialist. He's a close friend of mine, personal friend of mine. We just got to spend some time together in Vegas last month. You will not find a higher ranking subject matter expert on this particular topic. So the January 2026 report from the International Institute for Religious Freedom documented accelerating attacks on churches across North America, including shootings, arson, and targeted violence, confirming that the ideological infrastructure driving persecution abroad has operational nodes inside the United States. What the Nigerian experience teaches the American church is that survival requires three things that most congregations currently lack: situational awareness, community defense capability, and a communications architecture that functions when institutional systems fail or are actively working against you. So let's talk security here, Doc. What specific security protocols do you think American churches should be implementing right now, if they haven't already, based on the operational patterns documented in Nigeria and other high persecution areas?
Well, Chris, this is so important right now, and I think it depends on what size church you're at, where you're at. A small church in a town of 2,000 probably needs to look at this a little bit differently than a church of 2,500 in a major urban area, a major population center. But it comes down to a mindset. What are you doing to have a certain core, a certain cadre, if you will, of men who have some basic training in emergency management, who have some basic training in the physical attributes of crisis situation and management, who are coordinated together, who have a mode of agreed upon communication together before an event, and who are rehearsed in certain scenarios. And this is something that I teach when I teach crisis communication, about having a crisis plan. And on the communication side of things, you war game and you say, here are certain things that are likely to go down very negatively in the communication space. And what do we do to try to either prevent that from happening at the beginning, if possible? And if we can't prevent it from happening at the beginning, what do we do to mitigate it and to deal with it when it happens? That's the most basics of security. That's why people get security systems. That's why some people carry, is because you're thinking ahead of these things. The main thing is that pastors, elders, and men in the church need to be getting together and organizing and thinking about these things. At a minimum, you need a team. You need a designated team. And I'm not saying that that's a paid security firm. For some congregations, it may be. For other congregations, for most congregations, it's probably not that. Just like you have a board of deacons that handle maintenance and you have a certain group of guys that handle the offering, you should have a certain number of guys that are set aside. And this is part of their ministry to the church, is security and disaster preparedness. And God willing, you won't need it. But by gum, like we saw in Minneapolis, don't you think that church probably wishes they would have rehearsed that a time or two? And I guarantee you they're probably rehearsing it now. And every church should be rehearsing it. And that should be something that's on the mind of people who might want to disrupt. Again, that goes back to what we talked about last night. A hardened target is a target that someone is less likely to take a chance on. Well, a church that is rehearsing this, a church that has strong men who are practiced in this, they're going to be a harder target. So one, there's automatically a point for them that they're probably less likely to be attacked. But if they are, They know what to do in the moment. And some pastors, and I've had these discussions with people, with men who are good men who I love, who I care about, and we see it a little bit differently, who have said, well, is it really good to practice this stuff? Because then based on your actions, you might escalate the situation. In almost every situation, just being there and responsibly responding to the situation with the appropriately scaled attention at the moment is automatically going to be a de-escalator. If a belligerent shows up and sees that the belligerent is not going to have initial free range, the belligerent is probably going to leave. We should be ready for that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Just a couple quick things I'm going to rhyme off, and then I'll show everybody Keith's site, christianwarriortrain.com. I think one of the biggest things, Chase, that I see physically missing from churches, they have to install bollards around all the entrances. It is not been uncommon in Europe for jihadis to load up a vehicle with explosives and drive through an entrance to a church and blow the church up. Now, on one hand, thankfully, the ones that I'm aware of, and I've been studying this for a few years, are typically done in off hours. Like they just want to explode the church and level it more so than anything. But this can also happen, of course, when people are in church, and it's a low dollar thing that could be done. And you can do it aesthetically as well. I mean, you can cover them up in shrubs and stuff and still have security. The other thing would be to have a security team both inside and outside. I've seen a number of churches that when the sermon begins, the security team is inside. Well, that's great, but security needs to be outside as well. You need parking lot security. And the people who are on that duty, by the way, need to be educated in First Amendment auditors. These guys are scum of the earth. So they show up at a church and they start saying blasphemous, ignorant things. And as soon as somebody, says, you have to get out of here, they do something to physically remove them, they say that their First Amendment rights have been violated. Before somebody jumps in and says, well, that applies to public property, this has gone all the way to SCOTUS. If you are operating a church and telling people that it is open to the public and you let them on-prem, they have full First Amendment rights. So what they do is they turn around and sue the church for violating their First Amendment, and they bleed a whole bunch of money off of the church. Here's the thing. Whether it was the situation in Minnesota, First Amendment auditors, whatever the case may be, the SOP is really simple. Shut and lock the doors, period. It's that simple. If they had done that, if they had outside security on the ball in Minnesota that said, this doesn't look good, go into lockdown, the whole thing would have unfolded very, very differently. So it's having that situational awareness. It's having SOPs defined, all that sort of stuff. Let me get us over here quickly to just show everybody Keith. So christianwarriortraining.com takes you to a Substack. This is Keith's specialty. Inside of 5 years, he has literally become the global preeminent subject matter expert on physical church security. There is nobody operating at his level, not even close. Yes, I'm biased because he's a good friend of mine. But if you want to implement optimized church security, go to christianwarriortraining.com. I guarantee you will not regret it. I'll put the link down below for those who aren't familiar with Keith, by the way. So, Chase, when government institutions deny the religious dimension of coordinated violence against Christians, what's the responsibility of those churches to build their own intelligence and communication capability?
It goes back to the reminder that you have to take on a mindset that no one is coming for you. And we have this idea in the United States of, well, if something goes wrong, you call 911. And yes, we pay for 911. We have first responders. Most of them are outstanding, wonderful, brave people who risk their lives and they're willing to jump in. But time is of the essence, right? It takes minutes for first responders to get there, and a whole host of things can go wrong in a matter of minutes. And so this gets back to the whole discussion that you and I've had earlier about leaders in churches need to get their heads out of the sand. And I think gradually some are, but I think it's a deeply culturally embedded thing because of we've had decades now of this idea of churches don't get into politics, right? Because of the old IRS regulation, which thankfully is no longer enforced, that said churches can't speak to political issues. And that began a long slide towards, well, Christians stay out of anything, even involving anything beyond their own security, except when they're not meeting. It's kind of funny. A lot of churches who don't want to take action to actually have physical security during service time, when the building is full of congregants, when the threat is highest. But then when the building is empty, the majority of the days of the week, by gum, it has a security system on it. So if someone breaks that pane of glass and walks in, that trips an alarm. And of course, that's a good thing. But when is the risk higher? The risk is higher when it's full of people. And we used to be a nation that came out of the Western tradition that said churches are sacred. Houses of worship, period, are sacred. That even carries into our military doctrine. We are told, like, stay far away from mosques. I remember when I was in Afghanistan, there was a mosque directly across the street from my brigade headquarters. It did not look like a mosque. There was nothing about this building that had any markings of a mosque, any markings of a house of worship. It looked like an old dining facility, to be honest with you, Chris. Now, those of us stationed there, we knew it was a mosque because we were briefed. This is a mosque. Stay away from it. Like, don't even look at the thing when you're walking by. And it's right there on the road. Like, you can reach out and touch as you're walking by, but stay away from that thing. But we had a group of Air Force musicians who showed up one day to actually do a show for our troops. They did just a bang up job. And the next morning, they're waiting to get in the van to go out to the airfield to fly off to their next destination. And this building had a porch on it. So they don't know it's a mosque. They go stand under the porch to get out of the hot sun. And my brigade commander comes out of the shower in his flip-flops, and he looks all the mess, and he is just laying into them like, how dare you even go near the mosque? I mean, we're taught to stay away from it. Why? Because it's a house of worship, right? Even though it's a faith that I don't believe in, it's still a house of worship. That's how we're programmed, because we come out of the Western tradition.
Right.
The Marxists and the radical Islamists, they don't have that same worldview. To them, anything that is contrary to them is fair game, especially churches. And that's what we need Christians to wake up to, because there are so many who don't realize how the world is changing around them. A lot do. There's some great people. I encourage people listening right now, if you're on X, follow William Wolf right now. Follow J. Chase Davis right now. Those men are doing some outstanding work on this topic. There's been some great commentary coming out of Founders Ministries and the Center for Baptist Leadership in the last few weeks on this topic, talking about how pastors can actually begin to organize men within their congregations to do this in a way that does not make the church an unwelcoming place, in a way that does not make the church a fortress that is inaccessible to those who need to come in to be ministered to, but in a way that heightens the level of security and protection for those there. Because guess what? Not everyone feels called to be a martyr.
Yeah, true story, true story. So you mentioned first responders and response times. Let me give you an anecdotal example. So Keith was a cop in the Bay Area, San Francisco, okay? And when he retired, he moved to Idaho. He likes to tell people that when he retired, he moved to America, out of California into America. And he found a church that he liked, and this church is a decent sized organization. They have 4 campuses across a metropolitan area. And when he convinced them that they better start thinking in terms of security, physical security, and they gave him the green light, get this into you, Doc, he held an exercise at one of the churches, and he used things like UTM rounds. So you can take a real firearm and you can put these UTM rounds in. You can see how it's hollow in the end. There was a projectile, a man-marking projectile that comes out of the end. Think of it as a tiny, paintball. And as you can see, it has a primer on it. So the auditory report is the same as a regular firearm. Pardon me. And he had people coming in, shooting off UTM rounds. A note to YouTube AI, we're not promoting firearms. We're not selling firearms. We're not promoting ammunition. We're discussing church security. I'm so up to here with the shit from CommieTube. So anyway, moving on from there. So Keith had a bunch of people using these, number 1. Number 2, he had people throwing smoke grenades. Number 3, he told everybody that The response time was 8 minutes, verified by the local law enforcement agencies. And therefore, the drill was going to run for 8 minutes, with the caveat that when law enforcement responds, that's just one officer. That's just the officer who's closest. That's not the cavalry, right? So every minute while this, attack on the church was going on, he had a bullhorn. He was going, 7 minutes left. Wait, 6 minutes left. And anybody who's been in any type of hairy situation will tell you it's like time freezes. Every single person in that church died in that simulation. Every last one of them. And they also all said, holy shit, that was the longest 8 minutes of my life. I can't believe how long it was. So ironically enough, you'll love this one, Doc. This older lady, not like crazy old, maybe like 70-ish, 72, maybe rings a bell. She ends up volunteering for the security team. To this day, she's the sharpest shot and the cool as a cucumber versus all these other guys, retired law enforcement, GWAT vets, you name it. She did nothing phases her. So her accuracy is just insane. It kind of reminds me of Sarah in our Guardians chat. We get this into Chase. We've seen her take a tray of ammunition that's empty, okay, and put it behind a paper target and cut one hole out and put the bullet through the square and out the other side at like 20 feet away. That's accuracy for you right there. Anyway, long story short is when that exercise was completed, everybody across the board in the church said, holy crap, we got to have a security team. We've got to run scenarios. We need to get on this ASAP. So his church now, 4 different locations, has an amazing security team. But here's one of the things he did that's germane to the question that I just threw out there, is he established comms across all 4 campuses. So he used business class radios, much like the ones I use, because business class radios are the only way any non-military or non-law enforcement is going to get encryption legally in America. Plus, the radios have channel hopping. I mean, I'm sitting beside a Motorola base station that's my primary radio, but these Motorola HTs, they're about 3 times the price, 4 times the price of most radios. But again, encrypted. And I've got a 53-foot antenna out here, Chase. So you get 5 channels when you go through the feds for a business class license. You get a 50-mile radius, and I can hit all 50 miles in every direction, tested extensively. And at the end of the day, Keith put that in place for his church, which is great because nobody can listen in. There's no SIGINT on it, signal intelligence. And because they all have tall antennas, they're in constant contact even through the week. So when it comes to a comms plan, it's absolutely imperative that churches have some element of communication. If you don't have communication, you don't have information. If you don't have information, you can't make the right decisions. If you don't make the right decisions, somebody's life probably hangs in the balance if you're attacked. Maybe multiple people's lives are in the balance. So with that being said, and by the way, Chase, just my audience probably sick of me saying this, but we are this close to wrapping up the 2026 SHTF comms series, which is going to be 3 articles, 3 videos. Stuff has been on back order, and there's a couple T's I want to cross, a couple I's I want to dot, but hoping to get the first leg of it recorded this weekend. It will be the most comprehensive 2026 SHTF comms series out there, bar none. So with that being said, Chase, I think we've covered everything, but it's time to get into the practical payoff. So one skill, one item, one mindset shift that American Christians need to take on based on tonight's conversation. So I would put out a skill is learn to identify and document coordinated attack patterns in your local area using open source tools. It's the same methodology used by, persecution watchdog organizations to track jihadi violence in Nigeria, and it applies to threat mapping for American faith communities. And as an adjunct to that, if you subscribe to Survival Dispatch as a Guardian, you subscribe with Keith as a Christian Warrior, we both have alert systems that when we issue SHTF alerts like we did last Saturday, not a single person in either of our communities reported not getting it on at least one device. So we call it SDENS, Chase, Survival Dispatch Emergency Notification System. When we activate it, alerts get sent to your email, to your POC-Link radios if you have them, to the Substack behind the paywall, to the Element channel for SDENS. So Element is our ultra secure server, my server, where we host the Guardians community. And there's a couple other places it goes as well. But give me a skill, Chase, that you think people should focus on.
Well, I think, Chris, that in some ways it's pretty close to yours. And I'm thinking very specifically to the community in which I live, is knowing who the local activist groups are, and the ones especially, and when I say local, I mean within a 50-mile radius, because right where I live, there aren't a whole lot. There are a couple of personalities, but there's also a group of people who like to bust in from Kansas City area. There's a group of people who like to bust in, especially from the Lawrence area where the University of Kansas is, who like to show up and to make themselves known at certain civic functions. And so far, thankfully, none of them have tried to do that at a church, and I pray that continues, and I thank God for it. But I think it's helpful for church leaders to be aware of this, so that we as men in the church know who to watch out for. We can figure out, okay, if this person is here, that person isn't just someone we're not used to seeing, but we recognize that person. That person is part of a group that shows up and tries to disrupt certain meetings. We should probably go ahead and be prepared to activate a higher level of watch care on those individuals, and get the guys together for a possible contingency. Maybe even go ahead and call law enforcement, give them a heads up. Hey, these people are our church. We're watching them carefully. We're not going to do anything if they don't do anything, but we would ask with respect that you keep someone within a couple of minutes of the building for the next hour and a half. So knowing who the people are who are likely to cause problems. And I think they're pretty much all the same suspects. So they're not hard to identify.
Yeah. So no pun intended, but amen to that. So one item, and again, I know I speak a lot on communications, but it's deep in my wheelhouse. If you saw my backyard, Chase, you'd laugh your ass off. It looks like Area 51. There are 11 antennas currently set up in my backyard, and all spaced so that none of them become parasitic to each other. It's when the lawn guys came today, they looked at it and they were like, I don't think we can cut your yard. I said, I don't think you can either. And please don't do that, because you'll tear up a bunch of my radials and my coax. So
I gotta ask, how big, if you're willing to say that, is how big is your backyard?
It's not ginormous. It'd be between a quarter and a third of an acre.
Wow. Yeah. It's a small space for that much structure.
I have very strategically placed, again, so nothing's parasitic to each other. And I test that like nuts, because I test them one at a time, and then I put everything back up again, and then I test it with everything there with power running to one of the 11. So long as you're only running power to one antenna, you're not going to get any impact unless you physically touch wires, or you run, wires in close proximity perfectly parallel. Then you'll get, some feed that comes off them. But anyway, every church, every preparedness-minded household needs a communications plan that does not depend on cellular infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Because the first thing that degrades in any type of attack scenario is the network you're counting on to call for help. Somebody in my Twitter feed put this thing out and said, you got to do this comms plan. And I went and read it, and the whole plan, it wasn't a comms plan. It was an SOP. It was a really good SOP on how to make sure that, your family should do X, Y, and Z, but it was all predicated on the cell network staying up and having one device. In the prepper world, Chase, of course, 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. I can hear JP laughing right this minute. He's like, yeah, in Chris's world, 50's 49, 49's 48, so on and so forth. You have to have resilience in your comms plan. So what does that mean? There are going to be certain things like Garmin InReach devices are awesome. They work off the Iridium network. They work off what are called NOCs, on the ground network operation centers. Well, if the satellites go dead, now the Garmin InReach is no good. They're a great tool, and you can get them for a very reasonable price now. If the interwebs go down, well, that takes the knockout of the picture, even if the satellites are still up. It takes all kinds of things out of the picture. There's one and one only Walking Dead solution, and it's shortwave HF, shortwave high frequency. But the problem with shortwave HF is it bounces off the ionosphere and it can go all the way around the world. Well, if you have a horizontal element like this, you have a very steep takeoff angle, but when it hits the ionosphere and comes back down again, you have what's called the skip zone, because it's going up and down, up and down, up and down like this. And it's not uncommon for the skip zone to be as much as 50 miles. So you've bought the shortwave HF rig, you're a ham radio operator, you got your technician or general license, but you can't talk to anybody in the skip zone. So that's why I recommend that people, consider either business class or GMRS radios. GMRS, they're not encrypted. You get about the same power and coverage as these guys will with encryption, but what you should have GMRS radios for is SIGINT. Everybody around you has Walmart radios. Those are FRS radios, and they use the first 16 out of 22 GMRS channels. I run them all the time to listen to what people are doing in my community. There's no transmission, strictly receive. Anyway, long story short, I'll save a bunch of this stuff for the upcoming 2026 SHTF comms series. I guarantee you if nothing else, I am extremely comprehensive when it's something that really, really interests me and is in my wheelhouse. One item, Chase.
One item I got to tell you, Chris, it's going to sound so simplistic, but it goes back to when I was a soldier downrange. At all times, we had to have a tourniquet in our shoulder pocket, and attached to our kit, we had to have a first aid kit at all times. And any time that we were going outside the wire, if we were putting our body armor on, that body armor literally at all times had a quality first aid kit attached to it. And I think that's something that every church should have on hand as well, and people should be trained in. Again, that's a nice complementary effect of, number one, you have the team of men who are able to neutralize attackers, and two, you need to be able to treat people who are hurt until first responders can get there.
Yeah, and I would mention as well that in most areas and most church sizes, that you can probably get a stop the bleed trainer to come and conduct it at your church. And it's a great exercise that everybody should go through, because it literally will make the difference between life and death. Get this into you, Chase. I knew these guys where they went and camped, and the idea was that it was like an austere, a non-permissive environment on a Friday night with their kids. There were 14 of them total, parents and kids. And when they got up on Saturday morning, the mission was to walk 14 miles home to see if they were capable of conducting a simulated get home plan. Okay. One of the guys was a Green Beret who was a medic as well. And when they would be walking along, all of a sudden he would say, "Stop." And he'd hit the stopwatch and he'd say, "So-and-so's been shot in the left arm, right leg, whatever. You got 60 seconds. And there were some really skilled people in that group, and a bunch of them failed to get the tourniquets installed in 60 seconds. And they didn't do it once. They did it half a dozen times on this 14-mile walk, and it was a big, big eye-opener, because get this into you, Chase, they weren't told what to bring. They were told, bring what you would normally put in your get-home bag. So a bunch of them had tourniquets with them, but they'd never been opened. They'd never been, they'd never done any work with them. Maybe the same model, but I mean, North American cat, that's who you want anyway. At the end of the day, it's who all the professionals use. Great example for sure. I get behind that 100%, Chase. Mindset shift for y'all. Stop treating the slaughter of Christians overseas as a foreign policy abstraction, and start treating it as the operational intelligence briefing it actually is. What's being field tested against believers in Nigeria today is being refined for export tomorrow. Chase, I've been preaching this for years. We have to watch what's going on in other countries, especially Western countries. It is a harbinger of things to come here. And it is 100% success rate when you look at Western countries. Now, Nigeria, not a Western country, not a first world country, but still a great indicator of what's likely to come to America. And by the way things are going, probably in the not too distant future. Your mindset shift, Chase.
treat people like you treat facilities. We put security systems on facilities. We put out here in Kansas, we put lightning remediation systems on structures that are out in the open by themselves. We put in tornado shelters. We do all these things like building code around here. Every house has a basement because of the frequency of tornadoes. These are things that we do to try to protect structures. Are not lives even more important? And Chris, I want to, in addition to that, really kind of pound in and add to what you just said a moment ago about the mind shift. Being ignorant is not a flex, right? I know people, I know wonderful, wonderful Christian brothers and sisters who openly brag to me about, I just don't watch the news. I just don't watch the news because that way I don't have to be stressed and I can be carefree and I don't have to be distracted by what's going on in the world. I don't see anywhere in scripture that ignorance is a flex. Now you can go to the other end of the extreme and you can obsess, and we don't need to obsess. We need to be judicious. We need to be careful. We need to be informed, right? The Apostle Paul knew what was going on in his day. Ignorance is not a flex.
Yeah, well, very well said. I've never heard anybody quite put it in those words, but definitely well done. So that's it for the main topic tonight. We've got to touch on some stuff that we missed in the middle because we were on a time frame. Carnivalt.com, sign up for a subscription. This is 100% American meat, no mRNA, no antibiotics, no histamines, delivered to your door every month. It has 25-year shelf life, for crying out loud. And last year, there was a 49% year-over-year wholesale price increase in beef. Go lock in with a Carnivalt subscription. The price is locked in for 12 months. Number one. Number two, as soon as you buy one of those subscriptions, Off-Grid at $99 a month, Bug Out at $149, SHTF at $499, and you forward your receipt to support@survivaldispatch.com, I will give you a 30-day free membership each time you do it. So if you're subscribed for 12 months, you just got a $100 Survival Dispatch Guardians membership completely free by doing nothing other than subscribing and forwarding your receipt. So yeah, these guys are hardcore Americans. And I'm telling you, Cindy and I are subscribed to them, and it's awesome. We're building a new addition basically to our preps this year. Well, 2025 as well, thanks to Carnivalt. Also got to mention our good friends at wasatchwagyu.com. This is the best jerky in the world, like bar none. So it's an awesome source of protein. Here's my suggestion is, if you're like me, you're just going to eat it every time you get it. I can't save the stuff to save my dang life, but if you put it in your get home bags, once a year, you can swap it out, take it out a year later, eat it, put some fresh stuff in, but nobody else has our discount. And that is SD25, Survival Dispatch 25. Almost all of our discount codes are always SD something. So, SD Survival Dispatch, and then whatever the number is for the discount. But these flat strips, I've got one right here of Wasatch Wagyu jerky. This stuff is crack cocaine. I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. If you haven't heard the story of my wife telling me that it was a snack, not a meal, and my response was, I don't agree with you. And she came home from work. She said, what'd you have for lunch? I said, I made a dill pickle Wasatch Wagyu jerky sandwich with mustard on it, and it was out of the park. And everybody who's a Guardian who's tried it's going to tell you the exact same thing. It's absolutely phenomenal. I want to give you all just a really quick look over here. This is the Element server that I built. So I come from big tech. I was a business development guy for many, many years, but also certified systems and network engineer, programmer as well. You can see messages coming in live. So I took a project called element.io open source. I dissected the code on their GitHub. There are no backdoors in it. I put it on a very, very powerful server at my own expense. And about the only thing that could happen to us is Big Brother could come along to the data center and say, cut the internet connection. Well, that's okay. Go ahead. I have 3 images sent to 3 offshore data centers every day. I can have it back up and running in 3 hours. So when you sign up as a Survival Dispatch Guardian, which, by the way, is 40% off on annual memberships until midnight this Thursday, so it's only $59.99 a year, you get access to our community. There's 15,000 messages a week goes through this server now. And that's why you see it carved up into all of these different rooms, right? So you've got a general chat called the Guardians. You have Crusaders, our news team, blast stuff in there. It's read only. You've got Threatwire, which is also the war room, so intel-based stuff. We have a survival and prepping channel. We've got the SDEN's emergency notifications. Here's the one that went out on Saturday. Amongst other things, we have a gear channel. We have a comms channel where we discuss comms. We've got a Guardian Angels channel. I won't click on it. This is women only, and it's invite only, so all women are invited. The Insane Asylum, anything insane that's going on in our world or our country. We have a tech support channel. We have a kitchen food channel. That these people are guardians. I shouldn't call them these people, are constantly sharing food preparation and other things like long-term storage of food. We have a trading post. We have a religion and culture channel. We have a fur baby prepping channel, so prepping for your puppies and cats, I suppose. Medical readiness. JJ Carroll has a channel on here. He's going to be joining it later this week. We have another one for tactical training. So that wonderful woman named Sarah, here she is instructing people last weekend and running through some crazy drills. She's a pistol, pun unintended, but pretty badass. So with all of that being said, the final promotion, and I'm going to put a link for this for y'all in the live chat, is check out Chase's social media. Okay. So he's got a presence on every major platform, but if you go here for Finding Your Spine podcast, it's at chasespears.com. I'm going to throw it in the live chat right now on all 9 platforms. We're supposed to get Facebook back on March the 13th. That'll put us back to 10 platforms if indeed that actually happens, and if we manage to keep it. If we don't, oh well. So when you scroll down the page, the link I just gave you there, you can find his podcast on all of these different platforms. Follow him, subscribe to him. As you can tell from the past couple nights, if you didn't see him on previous appearances, he's got a wealth of knowledge. He's a hardcore toxic masculinity subject matter expert. And if we need more anything in America, we need more toxic masculinity. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So with that being said, Chase, I want to give you a chance for final comments, and then we'll move to the closing video. Just thoughts on overall, thoughts on your podcast, whatever you want to share. It's all you.
Well, Chris, it's always fun to be with you. And I thank you again for having me tonight. And the podcast is Finding Your Spine, and it's all about moral courage. And we have a lot of discussions kind of along the lines of what we've had tonight. We bring in people who have been willing to walk in the fire, knowing that it was going to cost them something. We're not talking about the folks who are Johnny come lately. We're talking about those who said, this is where I stand. I know it's not popular. I'm willing to pay the cost. And they did it, and they came out the other side, and they inspire me. And I hope their stories inspire others. But my call through this tonight and through the work that I do elsewhere is Christian men, Christian women, especially Christian men, you're called to stand. God made us to endure tough things. He made us to be able to deal with the trials that are put ahead of us. It is not an accident that we live in this place and this time. We live in this place and this time because we have a unique purpose. And we dare not sit back and say, woe is us, and talk about just how hard it is. Yeah, we can talk about how hard it is, but then let's get after it. It's time to close Lamentations. It's time to open Nehemiah. We have some walls to rebuild, and so let's get after it.
So I'm going to start referring to you, Doc, as Dr. Chase Crusaders.
I'll take it. I like it.
So, all right, we'll be back tomorrow night, usual time, 7 p.m. Eastern. We've got Don coming back. He was with us last week, 26 year U.S. Marine Corps. Of course, Randy Nance and Jeff MD will be with us as well. Tomorrow night's topic is from the Long War series, so kill switches. In other words, single points of failure. So whether it be power grids, fuel pipelines, telecom backbones, logistics hubs, they're all fragile and they all have catastrophic failure points. And we've now built the most advanced civilization in the world that depends on constant flow. And the Achilles heel is that flow can be interrupted intentionally. So you don't want to miss tomorrow night's episode. I appreciate all y'all out there who are guardians. It means the world to me because you're helping us in our mission to dispatch information to our fellow Americans and friends of America, so all y'all can survive in these very dangerous times. Special thanks to Carnival, WasatchWagyu.com. We do not get affiliate payments from them. They give us a stipend each month that helps us defer some very, very large costs to run this organization. There's a lot more to this than just podcasts, by the way. And beyond that, and between now and tomorrow night, if y'all could please like, share, comment, and subscribe, I'd appreciate it very much. God bless our law enforcement officers. God bless our troops. God bless America. Enjoy the closing video. It's a message from Department of War Head Pete Hegseth, guy's guy.
This is your moment. This is the generational turning point America has waited for since 1979, and since the rudderless wars of hubris, my generation, our generation, endured. Don't listen to the noise. Just stay focused. Our commander-in-chief is steady at the wheel. We face a determined enemy, but you are better. But we must prove it every single day. History doesn't care if we're tired, if we're scared, or if the fight feels big. It demands warriors who rise anyway. Peace through strength, the warrior ethos, lethality, unity of purpose, those are not slogans. They're the beating heart of what it means to wear the uniform, that uniform. You think clearly under fire, you act decisively in chaos, you uphold the Constitution, and you uphold our country without hesitation. We are not defenders anymore. We are warriors, trained to kill the enemy and break their will. History is watching. Be the force you swore an oath to be: focused, disciplined, lethal, and unbreakable. We will finish this on America First conditions of President Trump's choosing. Nobody else's, as it should be. And know this above all, President Trump and I have your back, always. Through fire, through criticism, through fake news, through everything. We unleash you because you are the best, most powerful, most lethal fighting force the world has ever seen. May Almighty God watch over you, and his providential arms of protection extend over you. Godspeed, warriors, and keep going.